My name is Alex, and I'm 28 years old. I've always believed that hard work pays off. It has to, right? Otherwise, what's the point of spending years grinding, sacrificing sleep, pushing through burnout, and making responsible financial decisions while everyone else is out having fun? That mindset got me through college, through the brutal years of working multiple jobs just to stay afloat, and eventually, to a place where I finally had something to show for it. A place of my own. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I wasn't stressed about rent. I wasn't counting every dollar in my bank account, praying I had enough to cover my bills. My apartment was proof of that. It wasn't some tiny studio or rundown place in a bad neighborhood. It was a beautiful, modern space in a prime location, something I worked for, saved for, and bought with my own money. No loans, no handouts, just me and years of effort finally paying off. My parents, however, saw things differently. Growing up, I was always the independent one, the one who didn't ask for much, who didn't expect anything, who figured things out on his own. My younger brother, Ryan, was the complete opposite. He was the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. My parents spoiled him rotten, handed him everything he wanted on a silver platter, and made excuse after excuse for him whenever he messed up. It didn't matter if he failed his classes, blew through money, or made terrible life choices, there was always some reason why it wasn't his fault. Meanwhile, I was expected to be the responsible one. If Ryan needed money, I should help him out. If Ryan got into trouble, I should be there for him. If Ryan made a mistake, I should set a good example by fixing it. It was exhausting. No matter how much I accomplished, Ryan was always the priority. It reached a point where I stopped bothering to fight it. I knew how they operated. If Ryan wanted something, he got it, even if it came at my expense. If I wanted something, I had to earn it myself. That was just the way things were, and for the longest time, I accepted it. I figured that once I moved out and built my own life, I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. I was wrong. A few weeks ago, I got the opportunity of a lifetime and international business trip that would put me in the same room as some of the most influential people in my industry. It wasn't just a big deal. It was the kind of opportunity that could change the entire trajectory of my career. So, of course, I took it. I packed my bags, got on a plane, and spent the next month working harder than I ever had before. It wasn't until I landed back home that I saw the missed calls. Dozens of them. My mom, my dad, even Ryan. I barely had time to process that before my phone started ringing again. It was my mother. Something felt off. My parents never called me this much. I hesitated for a second before answering. "Alex," she said, her voice unusually cheerful. "You're back." I frowned. "Yeah, just landed." "What's going on?" "Oh, nothing," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just wanted to check in. How was the trip?" "It was fine," I said slowly, still trying to figure out why she sounded like she was barely holding back laughter. "Why did you call so many times?" There was a pause, just long enough to make my stomach twist. "Well," she said, dragging the word out, "we have some exciting news." I didn't respond. I already knew I wasn't going to like whatever she was about to say. "We sold your apartment," she finally said, her voice practically bubbling with excitement. For a second, I thought I misheard her. "You what?" I asked, my voice flat. "Sold it," she repeated. It was such a hassle anyway, wasn't it? Always worrying about maintenance and property taxes, ugh, such a burden. But don't worry, we got a great price for it. My fingers clenched around my phone. My mind was racing, trying to process what I had just heard. "You had no right," I said slowly, keeping my voice calm even though I could feel the anger rising. "Oh, come on, Alex," she said, as if I were being unreasonable. "Ryan needed a car. You know how hard it's been for him without one. How is he supposed to get around? He has places to be, you know." I felt like I was in some kind of twisted dream. "You sold my apartment to buy Ryan a car?" "Not just any car," she corrected. "A luxury sports car. He deserves something nice, don't you think?" I couldn't even speak. My mother took my silence as an opportunity to keep going. "You should have seen his face when we surprised him," she gushed. "He was so happy. He even said, 'Wow, I can't believe Alex actually did something useful for once.'" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You're joking." She laughed, too, but it wasn't a joke. "Isn't it sweet?" I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath to keep myself from saying something I'd regret. "You do realize," I said evenly, "that you couldn't have sold my apartment." Silence. It lasted only a second, but it was enough for me to know that, for the first time, My mother wasn't as confident as she had been a moment ago. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice suddenly sharper. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I mean, legally, that apartment wasn't yours to sell." Her laughter had stopped completely. "Alex," she said, a nervous edge creeping into her voice. "What are you talking about?" I glanced at my watch. "You're about to find out." And with that, I hung up. I sat in silence for a moment, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to demand an explanation that would somehow make this all make sense, but I already knew there wasn't one. They had done it. They had actually done it. Selling my apartment wasn't some misunderstanding. It wasn't some lapse in judgment. No, this was planned. My parents had waited for me to be out of the country, waited until I was thousands of miles away, and then they sold my home out from under me like it was nothing more than an old piece of furniture they didn't need anymore. And for what? A car? For Ryan? I ran a hand through my hair, taking a slow breath. This wasn't just entitlement. This was theft. And the worst part? They were so confident, so smug about it, like they genuinely thought I'd just accept it. That I'd roll over and say, "Oh well, guess I'll just start over." Not this time. I scrolled through my contacts and called my real estate agent. It rang twice before she picked up. "Alex, I was just about to call you," she said, sounding slightly out of breath. I frowned. "Why?" There was a pause. "You haven't seen the emails?" I pulled my phone away from my ear and quickly checked my inbox. Sure enough, there were at least a dozen emails from the agency, some automated, some directly from my agent, all marked urgent. My stomach tightened. "I've been out of the country," I said slowly. "What's going on?" "Your parents came in with a buyer last week," she said. "They insisted you had given them full power of attorney to sell the place." I felt my entire body go cold. "They what?" "They claimed you signed over legal rights to them before you left," she continued, clearly choosing her words carefully. But something about it felt off. The paperwork looked legitimate at first, but when I tried to verify it, the signatures didn't match our previous documents. That's when I started digging. A slow, eerie calm settled over me. "And what did you find?" She hesitated. "Alex, they forged your signature." I closed my eyes, exhaling through my nose. "I wanted to call you sooner," she said quickly. "But they insisted you were in some remote area with no service." I knew something was wrong, so I held off finalizing anything until I could get confirmation from you directly. But then the buyer started pushing, saying your parents assured him the sale was official. I swallowed. "Did the sale go through?" "No," she said firmly. I stalled as long as I could. But they were getting aggressive. "I was actually going to report it tomorrow if I still couldn't reach you." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. They hadn't succeeded. They thought they had. They were probably celebrating right now, thinking they had just pulled off the ultimate scam. I checked my watch. It was late, but I didn't care. "Can you meet me at your office in an hour?" I asked. "Of course," she said without hesitation. I hung up and leaned back against my seat, staring at the ceiling. So they forged my signature, lied to a buyer, almost committed fraud in my name, and they had no idea that they had failed. A slow, dark smile crept onto my face. This was going to be fun. By the time I arrived back in town, I had a plan. I wasn't going to scream or argue. I was going to let them dig their own graves. I met with my real estate agent first thing in the morning. She had already gathered all the forged documents, along with her notes on how my parents had pressured her and the buyer. It was airtight. They were getting desperate, she said, sliding a folder across the table. The buyer was hesitant about the situation, but your parents assured him everything was fine. They even told him you were mentally unfit to manage your own assets, which is why they had control over the sale. I laughed, shaking my head. Unbelievable. She lowered her voice. I also checked with a lawyer. What they did isn't just unethical, it's a crime. If they had succeeded, they could have been charged with fraud and identity theft. My smile didn't waver. They still can. My next stop was the police station. I wasn't sure how this would go, but I wasn't about to let them walk away from this. I sat down with an officer, explained the situation, and handed over the evidence. The officer frowned as he flipped through the documents. This is serious. Forging someone's signature on a legal document, especially to sell property, is a felony. I figured, I said, keeping my tone calm. He nodded. We'll need to bring them in for questioning. Perfect. I didn't call my parents. I didn't warn them. Instead, I waited. It didn't take long. That evening, I got a frantic call from my mother. Alex, she shrieked the moment I answered. What did you do? I smirked. What do you mean? The police were just here. They said we committed fraud. This is ridiculous. We're your parents. You can't do this to us. I didn't do anything, Mom, I said, leaning back in my chair. You did this to yourself. Her voice trembled with barely contained rage. You're our son. You should be grateful for everything we've done for you. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble we're in? Oh, I do, I said. You forged my signature. Lied to a real estate agency. Almost scammed a buyer. That's not just trouble, Mom. That's a crime. She let out a sharp breath. It was for your brother, Alex. He needed that car. You have everything, and I worked for everything I have. I cut in coldly. And you tried to steal it from me. There was silence. Then, in a much smaller voice, she said, What's going to happen to us? I let the question hang in the air for a moment. I guess you'll find out, I said, and hung up. The next few weeks were chaos. My parents were officially charged with attempted fraud and forgery. They were forced to pay legal fees, and while they avoided jail time, they were hit with a heavy fine. The buyer, furious that he had nearly been scammed, was considering suing them for wasting his time. Ryan, of course, was furious. You ruined everything. He snapped at me when we finally spoke. Mom and Dad were just trying to help me, and now they're in trouble because of you. I stared at him, amazed. Are you seriously blaming me? Yes, he yelled. You could have just let it go. It's not like you don't have money. You could have bought another place. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's not the point, Ryan, I said. They tried to steal from me. They forged my signature. And you're mad at me. You're selfish, he spat. You always have been. I shook my head, suddenly feeling exhausted. No, Ryan. I just don't let people walk all over me. In the end, my parents' little scheme cost them far more than they ever expected. Their reputation took a massive hit. Friends and extended family found out what happened, and suddenly, their golden child wasn't so golden anymore. And me? I walked away with my apartment still in my name, and a newfound understanding of just how little my family actually valued me. But I wasn't mad anymore. No, I was free. And that was worth more than anything they ever could have taken from me. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That my parents, humiliated and legally reprimanded, learned their lesson and moved on. That Ryan, my so-called brother, took a moment to reflect on how completely insane his entitlement had become. But of course, they didn't. Instead, they doubled down. It started with the guilt trips. Mom would call me at random hours, her voice shaking with feigned sorrow. Alex, I don't know how you could do this to us, she whimpered one evening. Your father can't even show his face at work. Everyone's talking about it. Maybe you should have thought about that before committing fraud, I replied dryly. She gasped like I'd struck her. You're so heartless. We're your family. Families forgive each other. You could have handled this privately instead of dragging us through the mud. Like how you handled selling my apartment privately? I shot back. Silence. Then, in a choked whisper, you're going to regret this one day. And she hung up. That was just the beginning. Then came the excuses. Ryan, clearly emboldened by the fact that he had yet to face any consequences for his role in this, decided that the best course of action was to rewrite history. You overreacted, he scoffed when I ran into him at a family event, when I hadn't even wanted to attend. Mom and Dad made a mistake. Sure, but did they really deserve all this? I stared at him, completely floored. Ryan, they committed fraud. Yeah, but for me, he said, as if that was supposed to make it better. I took a deep breath. And you don't see how messed up that is? He rolled his eyes. You have money. You weren't even living there most of the time. Why do you care so much? And there it was, the root of it all. Ryan didn't see anything wrong with what they did because, to him, it was never really mine to begin with. No matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, he thought he was entitled to my success simply because we were related. That was when I realized something. This wasn't going to end. Not unless I made sure it did. The final straw came a few weeks later. I was at home, finally enjoying the peace and quiet that came with cutting them off, when I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Hello. A familiar, oily voice slithered through the line. Mr. Daniels, the voice drawled. I frowned. Who is this? A small chuckle. Oh, I believe we've spoken before. I was the interested buyer for your former apartment. I stiffened. This man, the one my parents had nearly sold my home to, should have had no reason to call me. What do you want? I asked, my tone colder now. Well, I was rather disappointed with how everything turned out, he said smoothly. I was promised a deal. A fine property, all wrapped up in a neat little bow. But unfortunately, you got in the way of that. My grip on the phone tightened. "Get to the point," I snapped. The man sighed. "It appears your dear mother and father have been desperate. They reached out to me again, asking if I'd be interested in a private arrangement to purchase the property off you for an even lower price. A hush-hush deal, if you will." My stomach dropped. They were still trying to sell my apartment. I was speechless for a moment. Then, slowly, I found my voice. "And what did you say?" The man chuckled again. "Oh, I told them I'd think about it. But you see, Mr. Daniels, I don't particularly enjoy being lied to. Your parents assured me they had full control of the property the first time. Now, they're acting as if they can negotiate on your behalf, when I know for a fact they cannot. It's all so sloppy." I was angry. They didn't learn. They weren't sorry. They were just looking for another way to get what they wanted. "I'm calling to ask you one simple thing," the man continued, his voice turning sharp. "Are you aware of this little scheme?" I exhaled slowly, forcing my rage to stay under control. "I am now." "Good," he said, "because I think it's time someone teaches your family a lesson." I leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" He chuckled darkly. "Oh, I think you'll like it." And that was when I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the phone call ended, I stood in my living room, my heart pounding with a mix of fury and determination. I had always prided myself on being the rational one, the one who handled business and family matters with level-headedness. But what my parents had done, what they were still trying to do, had crossed a line. They didn't see me as a person anymore. I was just a stepping stone, a tool for their schemes. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not anymore. I immediately set to work, getting in touch with my lawyer and making sure everything was legally sound. I had already filed a report with the police, but I knew that if I didn't act quickly, my parents might actually get away with it. The buyer's call was a wake-up call, and now it was time for me to fight back. I contacted the real estate agency that had first handled the sale of my apartment, explaining everything. The agent who had been involved was shocked, and after hearing my story, she immediately agreed to testify against my parents. We could use her testimony to prove that the whole thing was an elaborate scam. But there was one more thing I needed to do, something that would make sure my parents couldn't weasel their way out of this. I reached out to the media. I knew this wasn't a typical family issue. My parents had committed fraud in broad daylight, trying to sell something that wasn't theirs. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about principle, and I wasn't about to let them slink away without facing the consequences. The media response was swift. Within a few days, my parents' names were plastered across news outlets. They were publicly humiliated. My mother tried to deny everything, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that she had only acted out of love for Ryan. But the damage had been done. The authorities were now fully involved. The buyer, after being contacted by both the police and my lawyer, agreed to press charges. My parents were arrested, but the real kicker came when my mother was found guilty of forging my signature. She had gone to such lengths to manipulate me, and now she was facing not only legal consequences but also the collapse of her carefully crafted image. Ryan, of course, was furious. When I showed up to the courthouse for one of the hearings, he was there, standing with our parents in the middle of a throng of reporters. He looked at me with a venomous glare. "This is your fault," he spat. "You ruined everything. You could have just forgiven them. You could have let it go." I shook my head, no longer even shocked by his level of entitlement. Forgive them for what, Ryan? For trying to steal my home? For treating me like a pawn in their game? No, this was long overdue. He just stared at me, his face red with anger. "You'll regret this. You always do this, push everyone away. One day, you'll wish you had family." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already moved on. The next few months were a whirlwind of court proceedings. My parents faced the full consequences of their actions, fines, probation, and the permanent stain of criminal charges on their record. I made sure to stand my ground, even though every step of it felt like a bitter pill. It wasn't just about the apartment or the money. It was about their betrayal, their complete disregard for me as a person. They thought I would let them get away with it, that I would roll over because I was their son. But they underestimated me. The worst part, however, was how my mother tried to spin everything. After the legal proceedings, she called me one last time, her voice tinged with desperation. "Alex, we've learned our lesson. Please, can we just start over? We're family. Don't you want to put this behind us?" I let the silence hang for a moment. "No, Mom," I said quietly, "we're not going to start over. Not this time." And I hung up. That was the final conversation I ever had with them. They never apologized. They never admitted what they did was wrong. But they learned a very valuable lesson about the price of betrayal, and so did I. Looking back on it all, I'm glad I fought for myself. I don't regret it. The years of living under their shadow, under their expectations, were gone. I wasn't their golden child. I was my own person, and I would never let them dictate who I was again. So, what do you think? Reddit? Was I wrong for taking things this far? Should I have just let it go and moved on with my life? Or was this the only way to make them face the consequences? I'd love to hear your thoughts.